Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to take your seats, please? We're going to continue with our panel on Regtech. And Guido Governatori, who is one of the leading figures in the AI and law community, and an expert on Regtech and many other things, will be moderating the panel. So if I could just ask you to come in and please take your seats. I know there's a lot to discuss with everyone in the group. There's so much more to be learned this afternoon from our panelists, so I would love to hand it over to our panel, and we'll wait just a little bit more for people to come in. And yeah, I guess I'll just turn it over to you, Guido.
Oh, thank you, Ronald. So, and thank you for being here for these sections on Regtech. And then, the title of this section is "Are we in the golden age for Regtech?" Well, there are a couple of reasons why we chosen this title. Well, we are in the golden state. And, one of the reasons one of the many reasons why Regtech started to be popular, it's about blockchain. And essentially, you get money when you mine blocks. So it's the new form of gold. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the member of the panel. So I would like to thank Larry Bridgesmith from Legal Alignment. Larry, it's a lawyer and also with a brilliant career as a lawyer. And it's the founder and the CEO of Legal Alignment. And essentially today, he wants to speak about some of the recent initiatives he founded in Dash, which is essentially how to use blockchain to improve productivity for lawyers. And then the next is Kate Didech. And Kate is a lawyer, urban planner, and fellow here at Codex. And she wants to use Regtech for urban planning, regulations, and then to visualize building according to regulations. Finally, we have Amanda Ostrowitz, and Amanda has a degree in economics and in law, and it's the CEO and founder of Canarex. Canarex is a startup using regulatory technology for distributing information and classifying information about new type of regulations, in particular for cannabis and similar substances. Okay, so why Regtech? Regtech started as a spin-off, as a branch of Fintech, but now it's much, much larger. And then essentially what we want to do today, what are our objectives, it's just to investigate some of the following questions. And okay, let me start with my personal view about Regtech. And here is my, let's say, the Zen and the art of Regtech definition of Regtech. So, we cannot give a proper definition, but we will know when we experience Regtech. Okay, now, so, let's see in a more precise way, hopefully more precise, why we want to use technology for Regtech. And one of the reasons is now because now technology is available to enable analysis and use of technology for reasoning about regulations and legislation. And the problems we want to address in Regtech is that, compliance and regulations are very, very complicated. In most cases, you have tangled legislations, you have internal cross-references, and you have many, many different regulations that apply to a different sector. So for example, if you want just to open or you want to run a food van, let's say in Southeast Queensland in Australia, you have to comply, depending on the area, with 17 to 35 different regulations. And essentially, this is well beyond the capabilities of the owners. And those owners, they don't have the manpower, capabilities, knowledge to understand and to follow all those regulations. But they have to comply. The cost of non-compliance is, huge fines or being out of business. So what we want to do is to see whether we can use technology, computer science, ICT technology, to help businesses to ease the burden of compliance and see regulations not as a burden, but as an opportunity for growth. And here I have just some figures about the cost of compliance, this is just a fraction of the cost in the legal domain. If we just use at US, the cost of compliance approaches 2 trillion per year. And well, in a smaller domain, in Australia, it's about 250 billion per year. And just a couple of years ago, in 2015, it was 60 billion less. So it's a very growing sector. And in Australia, about 10% of the population, 1 million of the workforce, is employed in compliance and regulatory and related activities. And what's the problem? Well, just consider this example here. In Australia, it's a federal, and federal is one of the major sources for investments. And essentially, every time you want to do some business with the federal government, you have to go through procurements. And essentially, you have to submit a bid. And essentially, those bids are in average between $750,000 to a couple of $1 million, or if more. For every bid, there are at least 50 to 20 different bids, different applications. And then if your application is not compliant with the regulations, even well, there are some additional commas, some sections are missing, etc., your bid is discarded. And essentially, only one will win. So only 5% of the bids are successful. All the other bids will done for nothing. You just take a chance. You have more chances to win a lottery and possibly getting more money. Now, and then essentially here we want to see one of the problems. Now, just over a year ago, the Australian Treasurer said, the Holy Grail, it's when we started to actually write regulations and legislation in code. Imagine the productivity gains and compliance savings of instantaneous certified compliance. We did some case studies, we did some trial with industry, and then if you apply Regtech technology, you can save 30% of time and costs. So, well, if you just capture 1% of the cost of compliance, you already have a few unicorns. Well, okay, now, here it's what we want to do and why we can use Regtech right now. Well, as Bart said, well, we have a lot of research in artificial intelligence and law done in the past 20, 30 years. And we are already in the state where we can apply such technology in the Regtech space. So our idea, our vision is, well, when we started to have regulations not only written in natural language, but those regulations are also available in a computer understandable, in a machine understandable format, and essentially we have that particular representation, that logical representation, that AI representation of the regulations, and to a large scale for entire jurisdictions, it's available as open data with endorsement by regulators. And then if that is possible, then what you can do, you can build an ecosystem of APIs, of interfaces to build applications and essentially to reduce the cost of compliance and the burden of handling and working and be subject to regulations to the public. And also you can have much better access to justice because then you can build applications that can be consumed in that particular idea. What are the other benefits? Well, you can have more streamlined applications. You have better understanding of the regulations. You can understand whether there are loopholes in your regulation with saving of cost. And then essentially you can have it in some areas, in areas which are more prescriptive, more rule-based, and less principle-based, you can have a better understanding of the regulation and direct access to the regulation. Okay, so that's all what I want to say, and then I want to open the floor to my fellow panel members. And again, the initial question is, well, to try to provide a much better definition, or a personal definition of what is Regtech, a more precise of what I defined. So Larry, if you want to start.
Well, first of all, I need to say that I don't belong here. I'm a Tennessee lawyer. I'm a labor and employment lawyer. So I'm a blue-collar lawyer from Tennessee. So there's a lot of smart people here, and a lot of my heroes, like Monica Bay, Patrick DeMonico, who I haven't even got to talk to yet. Alex Nordham, Owen Bird, Tunji Williams, Mary Rednick. I mean, the minds that are here, I would love to just spend all day with each one of you because you could teach me so much. So when I say what is, again, I'm from Tennessee. Did you call it Regtech? What is it?
Regtech.
Okay,
Yeah.
Regtech, okay. So what I think that means is that the power of technology to do for us what we can't do for ourselves is something that we would embrace and benefit from. But I'm afraid that we aren't equipped necessarily to do that as well as we should. First of all, how many of you are lawyers? I'd say most of you. I was just at a conference across the valley. It was entitled the Internet Identity Workshop. I saw some of you there. And there were about 5 lawyers and 100 people. And they were doing things that I frankly was astonished at. And they were doing them collaboratively. So when I think about Regtech, my question is, are we approaching this big, hairy problem collaboratively, or are we approaching it the way we lawyers always do? Competitively, within our silos, and not sharing the opportunities that each of us are creating for the others. Because you see, that's what we learned in law school. Remember that phrase we all heard the first day? Look to your right, look to your left. One of you won't be here. Make sure it's not you. So I began to see everybody as my enemy. And I'm naturally competitive to begin with, but my question is not as much about the technology, which I'm fascinated by, as I am fascinated by our mindset. Because the big, hairy problems aren't going to get any easier. They're only going to get more complicated. How many of you learned anything about team in law school? Well, the courses I teach at Vanderbilt are all team-based courses. And my students say they've never learned a thing about team unless they've been to MBA school. And they teach everything in team, right? How many MBA students, graduates? Team, is that the way it works? Well, okay, Mary's been doing disrupt law for how long, 5 years or so? My wife says, Larry, you've always been a disruptor. When are you going to make any money at it? So I'm about to disrupt, and the invitation which was extended to me, I don't know why, I'm deeply grateful, but I'm about to assure that that mistake is never made again. So hang on.
Thank you, Larry. Again, my name is Kate Didech, and I'm a fellow at Codex. And I have a little bit of a different take than Guido does on what Regtech means. I don't see it as akin to obscenity and that you know it when you see it. I think of Regtech as taking actionable law and bringing it to the human experience. And doing so streamlines interactions between government, residents, and businesses, and it makes it more transparent. And I think the way to do that is to operationalize computational law, which is an idea that came to fruition here at Stanford about a decade ago or so. And computational law is mechanizing legal analysis, making it computable, making regulations computable, and then bringing it to user interaction. So a web app or a mobile app or a smart device. And I guess the quintessential and I guess a timely example of what a comp law product is TurboTax. For those of us who aren't from the United States and don't have the joy of filling out our tax returns by the 15th, TurboTax, it encodes the United States tax code. So let's say I'm entering in my income information, my financial situation, and it immediately computes my tax liability or my refund. And so I think the real promise of technologies like this, and the part of it that really excites me, is that it can make legal knowledge more and the regulations that govern our day-to-day lives that we may not even be aware of, it makes them available and navigable and actionable to everyday people. So I come at this from an urban planning perspective because I have found my niche in urban planning. And I think a lot about zoning because if you're a lawyer in urban planning, you become a zoning nerd, or as some might call me, a zonerd. Hashtag zonerd.
Sound like a stoner?
A little bit different. But these complicated zoning regulations, which each municipality has, they can be as complicated as the tax code and published in PDF form, so not very searchable at all. And zoning affects all of us. It affects the built environment. If you're a homeowner, it affects how tall the fence you can build on your property. It affects if you could operate a home business out of your home office. And so one of my dreams is that instead of having to navigate a 1,000-page PDF, you can just type in your address and figure out what you can do on your property. And I think that's really the promise of making just everyday people aware of what regulations apply to them and what they can and can't do as a result.
So Kate just gave me like PTSD to a city council meeting I once sat in for, where they spent over an hour and a half debating whether or not distance should be measured as the crow flies or on the walkable path. These are the things we nerd out on as Regtech people, and solutions to options and things like that. But it really, I do take a similar stance to Kate in that I think Regtech is about taking really complex subjects and industries and breaking them down in a way that's digestible and manageable, whether it means to be, automating the process of something the way you reference a TurboTax, or even making it researchable. I get penned as the cannabis person, but what we really are is we're a legal research platform for highly regulated industries that are hyper-localized. So what we learned how to do is track down from the first time a city talks about a subject through its ordinances, issuance of permits, and anything a city does on a given industry. So we did cannabis first because it was the fastest moving thing we could find. City councils only give you 72 hours notice that they're gonna have a meeting if they follow the rules. And so, for us, we learned by building one industry what there was in large gaps within law. And that's kind of what I think is really important about Regtech, and what it is to me is definitely taking these complex things and finding solutions that make them manageable, but also enable people to be more participatory in the creation of these industries. A lot of people really steer away from it because it's scary and it's daunting, but most of the laws, especially at the local level, tend to get made by lobbyists and a single interest, because they're who's approaching a city. And by the time it gets to the reading of a first reading of an ordinance, the law's pretty much written. It's already been through planning commissions. It's everything's happened behind closed doors. So I think of Regtech as a way, in just the fact how we identify that the subject's up for conversation, to bring a lot more people into the process of creating these industries, and also to create a lot more harmony in these laws. Because these cities, governments use our tools also to look at what their neighbor did on a subject, and hopefully avoid that city council meeting where you talk about measuring of distance. So that's kind of my take on Regtech in general.
Okay, so thank you. And again, I would say that we got quite diversity of opinion, and also, I would say we cover already also the second aspect, the second point we want to cover. So it's what will be the focus of Regtech. So essentially to make regulations accessible and complex regulations, complex legal concepts available to the public. So I would say, what are the challenges for Regtech? And what is the state of the art in addressing those challenges? In our particular experience, we work with some Australian regulations. For us, the major obstacle at this moment is how do we ingest the regulation. So regulations at this moment are written in natural language. And if lawyers do the proper job, they can understandable only by lawyers, not by common people. And then what we have to do, we have to translate in a language that can be understood by computers. And the sheer size of regulation is too much. In Australia, every year, 20,000 pages of regulations, federal regulations are written. And then this is beyond what we can really translate manually. So for us, the major aspect is not how to process the regulations once it's in a digital format, but it's to have the regulation in digital formats first. So So this is the aspect we find the hardest. And so we want to see what are the other challenges you have experienced with Regtech, or to making regulations more accessible using technology.
Me first?
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it.
Well, another hero just walked in, Oliver Goodnow, so I would love to spend time with him too. But I don't get to, because we're just talking to each other from here to there. So I'm going to be disruptive again.
Go for it.
So you used a word that I love. You said diversity of opinion, right? Are you a lawyer?
No.
Ah, that's diverse. I am. Are you?
Yes, I am.
Are you?
Sure am.
Okay, that's 3 of us. We got you outnumbered. As I look around, and we've already found that well more than half of you, I guess somewhere in the 80% factor, are lawyers. That means the rest of you are what we in the profession call non-lawyers. Look it, it's not a word. But you know, it's in our code of professional ethics. How does that happen? How do we segregate the world into lawyers and everybody else? I don't know any non-plumbers. So here we have a whole group of people, about maybe 20% of them are non-lawyers, and we're talking as if we're the only ones that know the answers. That's a problem. That's a real problem, because diversity has been proven to be the means by which innovation takes place. So if we're not bringing diverse perspectives to a single problem to the table, we're going to be talking in an echo chamber with minds that see it exactly the same way. And you can't work your way out of a crisis that way. So you talk about a challenge. Are we going to go into Regtech like we've gone into everything else? Confident, as you already heard, our personality is autonomous and skeptical and not very sociable. Patrick, you didn't mention the other 3. We are urgent and abstract thinkers to the highest degree, in contrast to the general population. And then on the negative side, you were very brave, Patrick, not to say that we're not very resilient. So I'm just telling you the truth. This is 5,000 personality profiles taken by Larry Richard over 20 years of time. That's our tribe. Are we content to stay there? Because there are big problems. This is but one of many. Or are we going to invite other disciplinary perspectives to the table so that we can find better solutions than our limited perspective is able to create? Because if we can't, we will make ourselves obsolete. I guarantee that. This is the valley of innovation. One anecdote. Had dinner the other night with a computer engineer. He works for Dell, but he doesn't build machines. When's the last time you heard of a machine built by IBM? Well, those of us who know the history, it's International Business Machines. They build software. Dell understands that because they build software too. And Joshua is the leader of a software development team, and this is how they work. Every day, he goes in and he manages a different team. Every day, he goes in and he works on a different project with a team. They're developing software that develops software. Get it? So the software that they develop makes software better, faster, cheaper, and it's open source. It's not hiding behind a firewall or a patent. It's available to everybody. So if that's only part of the story, because you want to know who's sitting around that table? Developers and engineers from IBM, from SAP, from Google, the other big names in this world. And the non-lawyers know that to be true. But we lawyers are convinced that we have the only answers to every problem. I'm about to get fired, aren't I? So we can either recognize the limitations of our own perspective, the heuristics that make us blind to what we can't see, and allow other people to intervene with perspectives that we don't even like, because that's what creates value. The rest of the world knows it. That's a foreign language to us. This is my 40th year of practicing law. I'm 70 years old. I've never been more optimistic about the future of my profession than I am today. Because the business world, the world that we seek to serve, understands that we've moved from the competitive economy to the collaborative economy. And they're blowing and going. And we're stuck in our silos. Mary Retznick is looking for data on lawyer performance. How many of you have technologies that might have data for lawyer performance? Well, I know several of you. Can she use it? No, it's behind your silos. I'm asking us, for the sake of our profession and for the sake of the clients we serve, let's get over ourselves. That's the challenge.
Okay, great.
Oh, no, it's not so great.
Well, great that we have a challenge.
Okay.
So with respect to the challenges that I think are facing Regtech, I'm going to follow up with what you said, Guido. I do think a huge part of the challenge is the sheer number and complexity of the regulations that you have to be able to compute. And I think what compounds that is that traditional computational law / Regtech apps require a huge amount of time to create and a significant amount of technical abilities. You need to know the front end stack, the back end stack, and the team of people that I'm working with at Stanford, we did a just informal survey of founders in Silicon Valley, and that indicated that it takes about 3 to 6 months to create such an app, which when you think of all the regulations, all the cities and counties, all the states, that's quite a significant load. What makes me optimistic is that I think in the future, it will not be so difficult and cumbersome to make these Regtech computational law apps. I'm very happy to be working with a multidisciplinary team of individuals that are affiliated with Stanford and Stanford Codex, and the company that we're launching, Symbium.com. It's based on a computational law platform that makes it very simple and easy to create these Regtech applications. So what originally would take 4 to 6 months, we can do in a couple of days. And that's quite a huge change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, unlike those two, I love the complexity because I wouldn't have a business if these laws weren't complex. Right? I don't want them to all be the same. It's good. Although, then they'll just find a way to take a 6-page law and turn it into an 1,800-page law. Been through that, too. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges that I think is a really interesting one is I think it's the convention, actually, of the practice of law in a lot of ways. And what do I mean by that? Well, Gene was just up here before and said, the AM 100, we don't flat fee, we're not ready for it yet, was kind of one of these discussions. And, well, when we give someone a tool that helps them minimize the amount of non-billable time before, right, that's an easy sale. I got you back 4 hours of your week that you can now go bill. Okay, but what if I took something you were previously billing 2 hours of work for and I've made it 20 minutes? Well, my simple concept is, what'd you charge the guy last time at $500 an hour? That was $1,000. I charged the client this time $850. They're pumped, right? Because I just saved them 15%. I did it in half an hour, right? My hourly effective rate now is at around $1,700, right? That sounds great, but people aren't doing it so much. The smaller firms are doing that a lot more, but so I find one of these challenges is the willingness of the legal community to change how they practice as well, because we can actually make ourselves more profitable, but there has to be that flexibility and openness to that kind of change. And the AM 100 is an institution, and it's definitely a little bit harder to make changes within that. So that's kind of one of the challenges that Regtech faces, for sure.
Good.
Okay, so well, we can move to the final part, and before opening to the floor. So the final issue is, well, we know that the future of Regtech is bright. So what will be a killer app? So Amanda, what's your opinion?
He skipped me.
Because I'll keep you last.
Oh, okay.
The killer app will be the one that saves me enough time I can actually go on a vacation again. The one that answers my emails for me. No. I'm seeing so many different interesting things out there, and I think it'll be really interesting to continue to watch. Obviously, I think what we've done is pretty interesting and fun, but I think one of these apps is probably going to come from a collaboration of these different companies in the room, and I think that's what's going to be really interesting to watch, is how these companies come together and really can revolutionize how law is practiced as a whole. And it'll be the one where they don't have to start training you when you're a 1L and bribe you with food to go to the meetings on how to use the tools. Right?
Kate?
So my idea, my dream, my Regtech dream, is a platform that allows regular everyday people to draft computable regulations as easy as it would be to just punch in numbers and formulas in a spreadsheet, so that anyone can build a Regtech app for themselves. And what benefit that also has is then you have a repository of computable regulations drafted by everyday people, then other people can incorporate into their own Regtech applications. And let's see, I think that once we do that, we're going to be able to tackle the challenges that we've indicated before, that there's too many regulations, it takes so much time to compute them.
Oh, I get to sit down again. That's cool. So my idea is not a technology, but it's a mindset. A mindset that I believe we all are obliged to begin with, because it was Steve Jobs who said, technology is not the solution. People are. So if we can't get our minds around a new way of doing business and a new way of doing law, then that 80% that we've heard so much about is going to stay unserved. That these complex problems that are only going to get more so over time are going to get less solvable. So I'd like to suggest that what we need to do is learn how to lead in a different age, and this is an exponential age. This was a book written for the healthcare community. It's a quantum leadership concept that is radically different than anything we've ever seen, because the old work world was built on ordered, vertical, stable, and controlled environments. Well, doesn't that sound like law? And then we moved into this period of chaos, where I think we find ourselves right now, but we're coming out of the chaos, because on the other side, there's this beautiful world of team-based, horizontal, relational, and integrated work. And it's not coming, folks, it's here. We just don't know about it. And these are the huge differences between the old way and the new way. The old way was effort. Boy, have I sold effort. The new way is output. That's what our clients want. And when we learn to make the transition from the 20th century to the 21st century, we're going to change things in radical ways. So I think Regtech needs a moonshot. That's just an amazing picture to me. You know that Elon Musk spent $500 million of his own money to put his sports car into space with Spaceman behind the wheel and David Bowie playing on the radio. And when asked, why'd you do it, Elon, he said, it was silly. I did it for fun. So how does anybody have $500 million to do something that silly? Well, I'll tell you, Tesla is not a car company. It's not a space exploration company. It's not a drilling company to build the loop from Washington, D.C. to New York. It's a technology company. It's an open source technology company. Doesn't hide behind a patent. Oh, no. Are you saying putting patent lawyers out of business? 1% of the patent holders hold 70% of the active patents. 200 companies purchase 80% of the world's legal services. What's wrong with this picture? So, Clock, born in this valley, now the third year of its existence with over 2,000 members, and they'll meet in Las Vegas in just a few weeks, with 3,000 people coming to learn how to do the first thing on their agenda, control legal spend. And this is what they say the AI use cases are that are presently operating in law. So what does radical collaboration look like? Well, one of those tools is Ross, just implemented at Jackson Lewis across the span of its entire firm, some 2,000 users doing research better, faster, cheaper. Kim doing process automation. LexisNexis doing risk solutions in the compliance arena. Introspection looking for risks within corporate data, notifying the general counsel before the risk turns into liability, the day it happens. Thomson Reuters WorldCheck doing machine learning. What happens instead of living in all different silos? They all lived in the same environment. And I heard it just spoken. I want a platform in which I can do everything at the same time in the same place, and everything results at the task level. Well, that's Dash, because that's exactly what we built it for. Radically collaborative use of your choice of legal technology. Everybody's dashboard can be different if we can learn to collaborate. Now, we have integration operations with Kim and Ross and Introspection. We don't with LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters. I heard about 20 more legal technologies today that I wish were available in my dashboard. So join us in April 30 if you want to see how we can get around our problems and get over ourselves, because these are some of the things we're going to deal with. The democratization of data. We don't need any more Facebook moments. What's secret should stay secret, and what AI needs should be available. And what about these people in Bangladesh? 700,000 people without an identity, which technology can give identity, verifiable claim status, economic vitality in the form of cybercurrency. You don't need the World Bank to do that. Are we up for the challenge? Are we ready to collaborate? Or do we want to stay in our silos?
Okay, thank you. And we still have some time, so we have 5 minutes. So I'd like to open for questions from the floor. Please move to the microphone if you have some questions.
Could you guys talk a little bit about the difference between regulations as written and how they are enforced? Because, for example, Palo Alto has a sign code that talks about how big signs can be and windows and stuff, and I would guess that probably 6% of the businesses in Palo Alto comply with that, and nobody cares, because the city takes the view that until somebody complains, we're not going to do anything about it. So it's really not just a question of ingesting, it's also, and if you go to a business person and try to sell this to them, they're going to say, you're telling me about a bunch of crap that no one enforces, I don't care about anyway. How do you prioritize and triage how you treat what are the important regulations and which ones aren't as important?
I think, every single city is incredibly different and county as to how they enforce, but we have looked at some of the trends in enforcement, and it's interesting. I think the first thing that they do, which is probably pretty obviously important, is what it poses the greatest risk to public health and well-being. So those things are very easily enforced and regularly enforced. And then the next set is what's easily enforced. So you'll see, is this goal to keep people safe, or is it to catch people in the cookie jar? So, right, so it's very, very variable, but we'll see, what's really well enforced, don't sell alcohol to people under 21. It's easy for inspection, right? And it's important. And so I think that's kind of a lot of how the hierarchy is there. But then it's also, challenging. I'm actually a former regulator, and I did exams. I did bank exams for the Federal Reserve Bank. And you have to decide, all right, we had to take 3 years just to even get a level of certification that says we're certified to go examine, and we get taught how to examine for years. And so it also depends on how sophisticated the vertical is that you're working in and how old it is. You'll be able to really see patterns when you're looking at banking, and you can understand how the targeted examination works versus new industries and the emerging industries. It's usually what's easiest and what's the most important.
I'd like to address that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So with respect to the question about sign codes, this is something that goes near and dear to my heart as I've drafted my fair share of sign ordinances. And I think you're right that generally the cities wait until a neighbor who is dissatisfied with what their neighbor is doing calls and complains, and then you have an enforcement action. The problem is each city and county has a whole plan of what they want their city to look like, and if we make that easy for people to understand and access, then you'll get a city that looks like what the community has envisioned for themselves. But in terms of what me and my team at Symbiom, what we focus on, the issues that we try to solve first, we work directly with municipalities and to work with them to identify their major pain points and how we can address them. And I think that's really, important for our work.
I want to just address that from the same problem that I've been addressing already. Because I was on the ABA's Dispute Resolution Council, and last year we got a grant from the ABA to solve the problem of consumer debt in the New York State courts. And so we did it the lawyer way. We got all the people who had vested interests in the status quo and asked them how they would like us to proceed. You know who we didn't ask, despite having begged and begged and begged? The consumers. We do the lawyer thing. We know how to make it work. Is Margaret Hagan still here? Because a human-centered design approach would have begun with the people we're seeking to serve and ask the question, what's the problem you're trying to solve? We don't build solutions and hope people will buy them. We ask the people what they need and then seek to satisfy them. Lawyers don't know how to do that.
Yep, go on for
Hi, thank you for the panel. I'm just starting to learn about Regtech. I'm really excited. One of the things I really want to find out from you guys is, for each of your own work on Regtech and your own opinions, how do you see yourself scaling this at a large scale while at the same time keeping some kind of quality assurance? Because I can imagine with the complexity of regulations, trying to automate them in some way can be really challenging. So,
Well, I'll tell you what we built. We are planning to scale into multiple verticals, and it's picking which tools you do that are scalable, right? I don't want to scale the parts that are requiring as much analysis, and I'm also not trying to take a lawyer's job away. So I'm giving them just enough to do their job effectively, and so that's an interesting one. But you say, how do we know where to go? And it's figuring it out. I mean, what we thought was the most valuable tool that we built was figuring out how to meta tag law in a way that was searchable, as simple as going on and buying shoes on the internet, right? I want a woman's size 9 heels. Well, in order to maintain the data that we were putting in here, we had to create another process. And that process was how we figured out how to automate what these cities were doing in their laws, and that became the most valuable thing we figured out how to do, and that's the one that scales across multiple verticals. So it's also solving one problem and then looking carefully as you do this, what did I just create? And then hiring, then you still continue to refine these processes too. So I've built a quality control team who they take on a certain percentage of the platform every week as well, and you just keep building new processes around it. And then as soon as you have it figured out, they're going to also change how they do it, and you're going to have to change yours too.
I think with respect to scaling, there's two important things. One is harkening back to my dream of a DIY application where anyone, regulators, everyday folks can just easily draft computable regulations like they would write in Google Docs or Word or a spreadsheet. So I think that's one way to tackle it. In addition, in order to do that, you need a very sophisticated platform that makes it so you don't have to write any code in order to get that sweet application.
Well, okay, for these solutions we created, we have a couple of mechanisms. The first is the representation one. So essentially the language and the tools we created try to simulate and to be as close as possible as the natural language. So what you can do until, and if regulations are written in natural language, what you can do, you can check with the logical representation, the formal representation, and the textual representation, and to see whether they have the same meaning, whatever it means. Then on top, we are using AI and law techniques to provide some form of formal verification. So in that way, we can handle the quality. The problem is scalability, but scalability as I said, it's ingesting. It's in translating from natural language to the actual code. So in our system, we have a few regulations already in, and then we have already several thousand of rules, and we have several pieces of code. So once you have the code in, we know how to do it. The problem for us is how to get in. And then one of the possible ideas is to use some natural language processing, so natural linguistics, to try to automatize or to have translation which are semi-manual, and then they have to be checked by humans. Do you want to take it? Oh.
Do you really want me to?
If you want, yes.
Okay, I do. I'd love to say that AI is not going to put any lawyers out of work. That'd be a lie. Because when AI can do better, faster, cheaper, and the market says, I need law better, faster, cheaper, guess who's going to win? The market. Let's let the market decide. Let's let the consumers decide. And if that happens, there are not enough lawyers to serve the 80% of people who want law better, faster, cheaper.
Yep.
Right, so you've kind of anticipated my question. I'm a non-lawyer. I have the skepticism gene, and I practiced law for 33 years with a big law firm. So I'm now a tech investor, and so I hear the rosy scenario. I hear how this is going to make law practice better, but I'd like to ask the panel to address the counter scenario, which is, why doesn't this meeting have a little bit of the overtones of a radiologist conference 20 years ago?
Great.
Where we're all talking about how, machine learning is going to make our lives better, It probably made the lives better of the remaining radiologists who are still practicing, right? And they're more efficient. Now, I look at a lot of tech companies and startups, including in the legal and Regtech area, and we've focused a lot today on how many of them are going to make law firm practice better, lawyer practice better. We haven't focused as much on some, but as much on those that do what law firms do in place of law firms, and that do things that law firms and lawyers cannot do, right? Which is a lot of what Regtech firms do too. So maybe we can address the other scenario, the less rosy scenario of what this technological wave is about.
Are you a radiologist?
I don't want to be a radiologist.
You said, did I understand you correctly, that you were a radiologist?
Oh, no. I say I'm a non-lawyer, meaning I've practiced corporate law for 33 years with Melvin and Myers, and now I'm a tech investor.
Okay. Well, look at the most recent radiologist convention of just 2 weeks ago, because they asked that hard question. They said, look, folks, we've been fooling ourselves if we think AI is not going to put us out of business. So how do we deal with the inevitability of AI? And could I second the motion? Let's have a conference that says, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, what are we going to do when AI does come to get our jobs? How are we going to adjust? What are we going to do?
Well, it's already happened without AI, right? I mean, when I first started practicing law, there were a hell of a lot more staff. There was a lot more associates and leverage ratios were higher. Inefficiency was rampant. You know, we didn't have PCs, we didn't have emails, we didn't have fax. That's all made us a lot more efficient, but it's also made for more lawyers. So, I mean, we already have gone a long way towards efficiency without AI. Now we're going to hit even the bigger bullet.
And to that point, I've been asking this question since January at every conference like this, from New York to London. I didn't ask it today. Of the lawyers in this room, what percentage of your day do you think could be automated? Because the answers that I've been getting are anywhere from 60 to 90%. So if 60 to 90% of your day as a lawyer can be automated, what are you going to do when it is? Because it will be.
Well, probably the answer, and unfortunately we're running out of time, it's go to the beach.
Well, the thing is too, right, like we wouldn't all be here as startup founders in Regtech if we thought we were going to put out our customers out of business, but you also got to be cognizant that you can sell Regtech and legal tech to non-lawyers as well, and we do that quite regularly.
So, well, please join me in thanking the panel members.